Hi, readers. We have followed Opal for 23 solid chapters so far. So I was thinking about everything we've learned about her and all of the different challenges that she has faced. And I thought the perfect way to organize the information I've received about Opal is to map it out on our mountain, right? We know that as we read a story, characters confront different challenges, and oftentimes on the other side of the mountain is where we find them once they've resolved those challenges. So let's listen to just a few of the tests and challenges that I think Opal's faced. We started out with her bringing home a dog that she didn't know from the grocery store, and we knew before she arrived that Preacher, her father, was not a fan of dogs. Okay, that's one test. And during that test of Opal's character, she showed us that she was a risk taker. Then we find out that Opal is by herself in a new town, that her mom has left her and she misses her. And we find out that those are two kind of connected tests or challenges that Opal has. And she solves them by becoming really open hearted. She's got a big heart. She wants to be friends with lots of different people. She doesn't judge how old you are or what your history is. And then as we keep reading, we find out that Opal describes her dad as, she does this a number of times, as a turtle who kind of goes back into his shell when he's upset. And I noticed as we go from test or challenge to test or challenge, that they become a little bit more serious, right? Bringing home a stray dog doesn't seem quite as serious of a test or a challenge as having a dad that is parenting by himself because your mom has left, and he tends to kind of hide some of his emotions when he's upset. That seems like a pretty big test or a pretty big challenge. And then we have another challenge where, as we continued reading, we noticed that Winn-Dixie is scared of thunderstorms, and we are at the part in the story where he runs away during the party. And I am just sitting on absolute pins and needles, wondering what is going to happen next. So I was thinking as we noticed kind of our journey up the mountain, how things were getting more and more tense, and our story was really starting to heat up, pun intended. It reminded me of a pot of boiling water, and how if I'm making macaroni and cheese, or maybe I'm making some pasta, the water, even if I get it super duper hot from the faucet and I put it onto the stove, I don't really see anything for a little bit. And then I see just a few bubbles start to form at the bottom. And then I start to see those bubbles rise up to the top, and then my water is full on boiling when it is the hottest it can possibly get. And that's kind of how our character can be tested. Once we get to this part of our mountain, the very tippy top, where our tension is as high as it can be, that is called a story's climax. And it's important for us to notice that as readers, how they're tested and how they respond, and ask ourselves, why could that part of our story be important? What does it tell us about our character? So we're going to take a look at chapter 4, and we're going to see if this could be our story's climax. Could this be when our character is tested the most in because of Winn-Dixie? So journey along with me through chapter 24. We're going to take some pauses and do some discussing. Chapter 24. Me and the preacher started walking and calling Winn-Dixie's name. I was glad it was raining so hard because it made it easy to cry. I cried and cried and cried, and the whole time I was calling for Winn-Dixie. Winn-Dixie, I screamed. Winn-Dixie, the preacher shouted, and then he whistled loud and long, but Winn-Dixie didn't show up. We walked all through downtown. We walked past the Dewberry's house and the Herman W. Block Memorial Library and Sweetie Pie's yellow house and Gertrude's Pets. We walked out to Friendly Corners Trailer Park and looked underneath our trailer. We walked all the way out to the Open Arms Baptist Church of Naomi. We walked past the railroad tracks and right on down Highway 50. Cars were rushing past us, and their taillights glowed red, like mean eyes staring at us. Daddy, I said, Daddy, what if he got run over? Opal, the preacher said, we can't worry about what might have happened. All we can do is keep looking. We walked, and in my head, I started on a list of 10 things that I knew about Winn-Dixie. Things I could write on big old posters and put up around the neighborhood. Things that would help people look for him. Number 1 was that he had a pathological fear of thunderstorms. Number 2 was he liked to smile using all his teeth. Number 3 was he could run fast. Number 4 was that he snored. Number 5 was that he could catch mice without squishing them to death. Number 6 was he liked to meet people. Number 7 was he liked to eat peanut butter. Number 8 was he couldn't stand to be left alone. Number 9 was he liked to sit on couches and sleep in beds. Number 10 was he didn't mind going to church. I kept on going over and over the list in my head. I memorized it the same way I had memorized the list of 10 things about my mama. I memorized it so if I didn't find him, I would have some part of him to hold on to. But at the same time, I thought of something I had never thought of before, and that was that a list of things couldn't even begin to show somebody the real Winn-Dixie. Just like a list of 10 things couldn't ever get me to know my mama, and thinking about that made me cry even more. Readers, this is a time when I start to wonder if possibly this is the climax of the story. Opal has had a lot of challenges, but one supporting character that has really brought her through those tests has been Winn-Dixie, right? Not only was he her very first friend in Naomi, but he's kind of introduced her to other friends and other characters in the story. And there aren't many parts of our story where Winn-Dixie isn't with Opal. But then, after I think about that for a moment, I also think, wow, Opal has become really strong in our story. And she's been tested a lot. And a lot of those tests, a lot of those challenges, she was able to overcome, right? She did convince Preacher that Winn-Dixie should stay. She also was able to make some friends so that she wasn't so lonely. She did get some more information from her mama after being a risk taker with Preacher. So I'm wondering if maybe there's something even bigger. Maybe this is not the top of our mountain. Possibly this isn't the climax. Is there something more? Let's read to find out. Me and the preacher looked for a long time. And finally, he said we had to quit. But Daddy, I said, Winn-Dixie's out there somewhere. We can't leave him. Opal, the preacher said, we have looked and looked, and there's only so much looking we can do. I can't believe you're going to give up, I told him. India, Opal, the preacher said, rubbing his nose, don't argue with me. I stood and stared at him. The rain had let up some. It was mostly a drizzle now. It's time to head back, the preacher said. No, I told him. You go ahead and go, but I'm going to keep on looking. Opal, the preacher said in a real soft voice, it's time to give up. Wow, I just am not sure after this page that the climax is actually Opal losing Winn-Dixie. I wonder if it's this tension that she's experiencing with Preacher, how Preacher wants to give up on Winn-Dixie when Opal refuses to. And I wonder if she thinks, is this possibly you being a turtle going back into your shell? Did you maybe give up on Mom? We know Opal certainly isn't willing to. Let's see how she responds to the test, the climax of the story. You always give up, I shouted. You're always pulling your head inside your stupid old turtle shell. I bet you didn't even go out looking for my mama when she left. I bet you just let her run off too. Baby, the preacher said, I couldn't stop her. I tried. Don't you think I wanted her to stay too? Don't you think I miss her every day? Whoa, readers. We know more about Preacher in just those few sentences than we've learned about him this entire story. He is finally opening up. He spread his arms out wide and then dropped them to his sides. I tried, he said. I tried. Then he did something I couldn't believe. He started to cry. The preacher was crying. His shoulders were moving up and down, and he was making snuffly noises. And don't believe that losing Winn-Dixie doesn't upset me as much as it does you, he said. I love that dog. I love him too. Daddy, I said. I went and wrapped my arms around his waist. He was crying so hard he was shaking. It's all right, I told him. It's okay. Shh, I said to him like he was a scared little kid. Everything will be okay. We stood there hugging and rocking back and forth, and after a while, the preacher stopped shaking, and I still held on to him. And I finally got the nerve to ask the question I wanted to ask. Do you think she's ever going to come back? I whispered. Whew, so much tension. Preacher's coming out of his shell, and Opal is asking him her deepest question. No, the preacher said. No, I do not. I've hoped and prayed and dreamed about it for years, but I don't think she'll ever come back. Gloria says that you can't hold on to anything, that you can only love what you've got while you've got it. She's right, the preacher said. Gloria Dump is right. I'm not ready to let Winn-Dixie go, I said. I had forgotten about him for a minute, what with thinking about my mama. We'll keep looking, said the preacher. The two of us will keep looking for him. But do you know what? I just realized something, India Opal. When I told you your mama took everything with her, I forgot one thing, one very important thing that she left behind. What? I asked. You, he said. Thank God your mama left me you. And he hugged me tighter. I'm glad I got you too, I told him, and I meant it. I took hold of his hand and we started walking back into town, calling and whistling for Winn-Dixie the whole way. I'm so glad our climax has been reached, friends, and I just feel like we are on our way down this mountain. Things are becoming resolved as Opal now has friends, Preacher has come out of his turtle shell, and she knows that her mom is not coming back. But at the same time, she knows how much she means to Preacher.